Nigeria's bad roads are taking a toll on our economy. Babatunde Yusuf of Business Day wrote, and I quote, "Drive anywhere in Nigeria, and it will take long to find evidence of a broken system. Cracked right-ways, created city streets, and rural roads that are somehow impassable. For decades, the conversation around bad roads has centered on inconvenience and traffic. But there's a cheaper and less talked about consequence. And this is the toll these bad roads are taking on our economy and our security. Road transportation remains the backbone of commerce in Nigeria, and 90% of goods and passengers are moved by roads, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. Yet many of these roads are in poor condition, making delivery times slow, increasing fuel costs, and the lifespan of vehicles drop dramatically. So who pays for this inefficiency? The consumers, the business owners, and the government. All lose in different ways, albeit. A 2022 report by the World Bank estimated that Nigeria loses about 1 billion annually due to poor road infrastructure. This includes losses from increased travel times, higher vehicle operation costs, and goods damaged in transit. Can a developing economy afford such a loss year after year? Especially when capital budgets are shrinking and inflation is rising? The answer is clearly no. As of December last year, Nigeria's public debt stood at $94 billion, an equivalent of 144.7 trillion naira. Since President Tinubu assumed office in 2023, public debt has jumped by 65%. A fresh $24 billion borrowing, which is on offer, may balloon Nigeria's debt to 183 trillion. Let's consider the agricultural sector. Farmers in Benue or Taraba, when Boko Haram bandits allow them, often struggle to get their produce to markets in Lagos and Port Harcourt due to inaccessible rural roads. And the result is definitely food waste. The Nigerian Stored Products Institute even estimates that up to 40% of food produced in the country never reaches the final consumer, largely due to transportation and logistics challenges. Isn't this concerning for a country not free from food shortages? In urban areas, the economic cost translates to lost productivity. Workers spend hours in traffic jams caused by bad roads. This isn't just about time, it's about GDP. How many work hours are daily lost due to roads that were either poorly constructed or left unrepaired for decades? How much value is drained from the economy by this everyday inefficiency? Logistic companies are among the hardest hit. Businesses like GIG Logistics or Jumia spend heavily on vehicle maintenance and fuel because of rough terrains. These extra costs are passed on to consumers. Is it any wonder that intra-country shipping in Nigeria costs more than any other, and that in many other West African countries with better road network? Foreign investment also suffers from our bad roads. Investors visiting Nigeria will definitely judge the state of the country by its infrastructure. When road travel between major cities becomes a gamble, the overall investment climate is certainly unfavorable. In 2023, Nigeria attracted just 3.7 billion in foreign direct investment, a significant drop from previous years. The effects ripple into insecurity. Bad roads slow down emergency responses ambulances, police patrols, and even military find it difficult to access volatile areas. In regions plagued by banditry or communal clashes, poor road networks complicate enforcement and evacuation. An economy whose growth is challenged seriously by road infrastructure and poor agricultural development, public policy must develop a new way to tackle them. I'm of the considered view that the use of foreign contractors to do our roads is exploitative, expensive, and must be abandoned. We have very qualified Nigerian engineers and youths who can be transformed into a road army. This road army should be equipped by joint funding of local government, states, and federal government. There is an army of unemployed Nigerian youths who can play this role patriotically and efficiently, saving our state and federal governments loads of scarce resources. The raw material for road development, except machineries, is local. Most state governments will facilitate their cheap acquisition in exchange for communal projects of hospitals, roads, and schools. Many Nigerian roads and civil engineers are either underemployed, under-remunerated, or just applicants. A vast number of unskilled young school graduates can be easily mobilized as tipper drivers, masons, and iron benders. This is how China grew up. A national policy for road development can be formulated using various engineering and accounting faculties in our universities as the technical support groups. You don't even need to waste money on consultants. This will provide competition, training, employment, and rapid development. The country will be divided into 12 zones with annual target for road development and maintenance. A competition will develop. Skills will be learned practically. Joint state and federal finance will be worked out to keep various road authorities busy all year round. When road tarring cannot be done because of weather, culverts and gutter formations can be fabricated. A lot of young men occupied by these skills will be less prone to crime, and development of roads in all states of the Federation involving our youth will lessen crime, stimulate rural economy, reduce completion time, and grow our economy exponentially. This same system can also be adopted for agriculture. You know, I have always said that developing agriculture is the easiest thing any government can do. Our people in the rural areas are already used to farming. What they need is incentive from government. And this incentive is a one capital incentive. Where is your land? I will fence it for you. I will give you seedlings. I will give you fertilizers. I will irrigate the entire farm area so that every farm can have water. It doesn't take more than 2 or 3 boreholes in a community. I will buy your products. I will channel them for exports and for domestic distribution. I will reflate the economy. It's as simple as that. Under the regional governments, we did it. And we had granite pyramids in the north. We had rubber in the Midwest. We have palm kernel and palm produce in eastern Nigeria. And we didn't have oil then. My father was the first minister of commerce and industry to open the first oil well in Nigeria when I was in primary school. That oil has not facilitated our development because we neglected other areas that made us who we were before oil came. Not even one local refinery can give us our petrol and diesel. Well, the same system, the consequences. Well, let me go. If I may illustrate my points by a brief narration of my experience, this picture will become clearer. I was born in 1952 to a father who was a politician and member of the Eastern House of Assembly and regional minister. When I started primary school in 1957, my classmate, Peter, was the junior brother of my father's driver. Other mates of mine were children of farmers, coal miners, traders, dispensers, teachers. My first primary school, St. Patrick's River Valley, was in rural Enugu, very close to the coal mines. My senior brother, who is here, Okwesileze, and my late sister, Cecilia, were in the same school. House boys and house girls in our family attended the same school as we did. There was no school for the children of the rich or privileged and another school for the children of the less privileged. The fees were affordable. Cars hardly brought us to school, in spite of the fact that the school was 2.5 miles from our home. When Daddy's driver ever came for us, because he was traveling to his constituency on a weekend and needed to take us along, the driver would park outside the school gate and we would try to quickly run to the car after dismissal to escape abuses from our classmates. We must also pick our driver's brother and all others whose homes were on our way in order to reduce the number of classmates protesting against a one-day luxury we enjoyed in 1 month. At secondary school, my first deployment for morning functions landed me in a public urinary. My father was a minister then. The white reverend brothers in charge of my school, College of Immaculate Conception, Enugu, didn't care who your father was. In fact, I believe I was deployed to the public urinary to ensure that I didn't regard myself as special. The urinary was filled with spirogyra and smelly. I had to buy an iron brush to cope with the cleaning and some Dettol to disinfect the place, as well as protect myself from infection. After 1 month of keeping a clean urinary, I was commended in a morning assembly and deployed to look after a flower bed. The lesson was obvious. There is no big man's son here. Because I showed no dissatisfaction, I was able to pass the test. Because of my primary school experiences and holiday experiences with my grandmothers, which informed my willful obedience, I was rewarded with appointment as a class prefect. That time, every holidays, we were sent to my grandmother in the village. There was no pipe-borne water. We trekked 3 miles to fetch water until Okpara put a borehole in our place. And I went with my village age mates. And it was a pleasure to trek 3 miles, know them, enjoy the culture. I speak my language better than most poor families, children in my community, in spite of the fact that my father was minister. But today, the children of the big men hardly speak their local language. They hardly even visit their villages. Notwithstanding the level of intelligence of a rich man's child, his child must go to a very good school or a very expensive school. Sometimes the admission is bought. In my university experience in the University of Ibadan, between 1972 and 1976, I was elected Student Union President in favor of a Yoruba opponent by a majority Yoruba student electorate. Nobody cared where you came from. I was just fresh from the war and a Biafran soldier. I had never visited Ibadan all my life until then. I sat for entrance exams in Aba. Even though we lived in Enugu, there was only one center for University of Ibadan in Eastern Nigeria then. There was no center in Enugu. Sleeping in Aba is another story I won't tell today. Our generation was challenged to be hardworking and to dare your over-preparedness. The nation was training its successors, like secondary school where I had expatriate teachers from India and the United Kingdom. University of Ibadan had teachers from all continents of the world. One of my teachers pitied me so much because I missed quite a number of lectures attending students' union duties that he arranged private classes for me. He taught me financial accounting. His name is Professor Nnia. This built my sense of sacrifice, my patriotism, my eventual desire to go into public service. We must all resolve to banish this monetized economy and way of life. Merit in our country has disappeared in appointments, in elections, and lately in award of university degrees. Sometimes you meet a professor who can hardly speak good English, and you begin to wonder how he wrote his thesis. He or she probably monetized the process. The worst situation is to find a minister who has been the equivalent of a director and who has never been the equivalent of a director in a ministry, or whose educational qualification and exposure is obtained in compromising circumstances. You see why we got here. These days, a minister is taken for Senate hearing and is asked to take a bow. In Shagari's ministerial list, His Excellency Emeka Anyoko and I were nominated from all Anambra State under the leadership of the Senate by Senator late President Joe Wires, may his soul rest in peace. We were not patronized by any take a bow. We were thoroughly grilled by a Senate subcommittee. Inquiries of you were made in your previous educational institutions and workplaces. Your policy conception and execution capacity were extrained by hypothetical questions, mirroring anticipated challenges you may face in your ministry. Today, it is take a bow. Sometimes, I wonder whether the senators are too busy to do more intensive interventions. The fact is that we leave behind for our children no tradition on how we recruit public officers. So when they get up and portray their unpreparedness for such exalted offices, nobody is surprised. The civil servants find no motivation from a leader without a goal, an experience, or a drive for excellence. It is all patronage, they say. No wonder a minister turns a ministry account into a private account, and after all the noise of her arrest, nobody hears of how much is recovered or any prosecution. Going forward, I advise that we should have more scrutiny at INEC and National Assembly levels of qualifications of those who aspire to public offices in our country. In the last 2 years, the standard of living of the average Nigerian has dangerously plummeted. The president meant well when he decided to remove oil subsidy. The intention was to free resources in order to stimulate production and so growth well across the board. Unfortunately, the administrative organization of the country and the recurrent process of political heads, recruitment process of political heads at the state and local governments did not help his vision. In many developed countries of the world, local governments are rich and carry on enormous responsibilities like education, water supply, agricultural investments, road development, security, and industrial promotion. In this country, governors basically choose local government chairmen. The elections that are held are a formality to window dress a carefully rehearsed arrangement. The process has continued with impunity. In fact, it has even extended to houses of assembly. Recently in Lagos State, the State Assembly was ordered to reverse its decisions on its leadership selection, what is normally an internal affairs of the legislature. The failure of the subsidy injection into vital productive areas of the economy has led to limited growth and an unprecedented high cost of living. Most low-wage earners can hardly afford a basic standard of living. School fees, transport costs, house rents for homes have experienced, in some cases, 100% increase, wiping away the relief expected from a percentage increase in salary emoluments. In the education sector, a clear divide of schools for the wealthy families and schools for the poor families has come to stay. This tendency breeds deep and growing sense of deprivation and bitterness that is likely to affect the relationship amongst this generation of our children. Crime has risen to a dangerous scale, and the law enforcement agents are overstretched. I tell you a story. When I went to College of Immaculate Conception, my secondary school, I had two classmates who were recipients of my father's scholarship, Gregory and Sylvester. They are both dead now, may their soul rest in peace. Gregory became eventually the head of Anambra Imo River Basin Authority. Sylvester became a professor of philosophy. When we were in class 1 and 2, Gregory and Sylvester were beating me in class. When the results came to my father's office, we went for the report cards. And Gregory and Sylvester will be the first 7 in the class. I will be struggling to be between the 7th and 12th out of a class of 30. And my father would call us to talk to us about our results. And my father would tell me, with an average life expectancy, you are a finished boy, you know. He would say it in Igbo, and I'll translate it to you. Those whose father has courtesy to me, you will eventually courtesy to them. And I will say to him in Igbo, if this is a curse, it will never happen. He said to me, but it is happening. What am I trying to say? The son of the farmer who had potential had brighter prospects than the son of a minister. I never exceeded them until I came into real life. And I was able to help them to get good employments that enabled them to reach the zenith of their career. But their opportunity recognized their potential. And they gave their best and they rose as high as they could. That is not possible today. The major constitutional reforms of this country have been influenced more by the military. That led us to a command and control structure rather than a political structure. In most developed countries of the world, with our kind of political structure, a state government cannot interfere with the day-to-day administration of a local government area. This denial of effective control of local government resources and accompanying financial regulations to ensure accountability has led to misuse of local government funds, absence of concrete achievements at that level, and the attraction of that office by those who are competent enough to elevate its capability. Netherlands is the second largest exporter of food in the world, coming after the United States of America. Its cross-sectional area is about 0.5% of Niger State of Nigeria. It is the world's largest exporter of potatoes. Its revenue from vegetables and dairy contribute more than 100 billion annually to its economy in dollars. The secret is education, better mechanized farming, growth of green farm technology, drone monitoring systems, and land reclamation by building of dams. Why can't we do better with our vast land resources? Mr. Chairman, there was a time when the mainstay of our economy was agriculture. The North had granite pyramids, cotton and livestock. The West had cocoa, Midwest had rubber and palm oil, and the East had palm produce, cashew nuts and cassava. At the same time that these agricultural yields were booming, we had an exponential growth of import substitution industries. Textile mills were established in the North and in the East. Cement factories, breweries, iron and steel complexes, power stations flourished. New universities were built and maintained to meet international standards. Our secondary schools attracted students from all other African countries, especially those like the Sudan, who were in turmoil. Our reputation in the West African Examination Council results were the highest. Our finished products were demanded in renowned world universities. There was only one reason why things worked so well then. We had a regional system of government that allowed regions to enjoy sovereignty over their natural resources whilst paying royalties and taxes to the federal government. Our domestic security was independent, uncontrolled by federal government. Suddenly, the army came and abrogated our constitution, turned us into a unitary state, and imposed a unitary constitution on us. Our constitution was promulgated by a group of military men who were unelected. There was no equality of representation of the various regions in the drafting of the constitution. They carved us into states and local governments without any known parameter or plebiscite. They seized our natural resources and donated them to the federal government to share without adequate respect for derivation. Our constitution is not touched on us. It claims to have been made by we, the people of Nigeria. But this was falsehood. We didn't have a referendum or a plebiscite for it, nor did we have an elected assembly to debate and ratify it. It was simply imposed on us. With it came the worst form of participatory democracy that our country has ever seen. Today, there is the dictatorship of the political parties. Candidates are imposed on the people without transparent primaries. In some cases, no primaries take place at all. Governors have become appointing authorities for candidates for elective offices in their states. You cannot become a candidate without the governor's approval in today's Nigeria. The nomination congresses are just a matter of formality. Where governors are resisted in this form of nomination, the richest candidate buys the position. Of course, where the politician disgorges with the electorate, the tendency to recoup at the center is almost inevitable. The smart ones escape but a few are jailed. They come out of jail with their ill-gotten wealth and still remain relevant. The Electoral Commission, the security services, the courts are constantly manipulated by the rich politicians. Our electoral system has become corrupted and unattractive to honest and brilliant citizens. The mess continues. What must be done to avert this coming catastrophe? Nigeria must restructure and give its component units sovereignty over its natural resources, provided they pay royalty or some form of taxation to the federal government to maintain federal responsibilities like external defense, foreign missions, customs, and immigration. In this way, true democracy will evolve and the speed of development increased. Emphasis must return to agriculture and education. Education must emphasize on Renaissance digital orientation. Domestic security must remain in the hands of federating units. The secularity of the Nigerian state must be respected. These irresistible minimum conditions are non-negotiable. If it does not happen, we have no alternative but to go our separate ways. Processes to begin our restructuring as a nation must be concluded before the 2027 elections, so as to avert a situation where sections of the country may boycott elections and present the country with a constitutional force majeure. I'd like to end this speech by quoting William Shakespeare in Julius Caesar, where he said, and I quote, "There is a tide in the affairs of men, which, taken at the flood, leads to fortune. Omitted all the voyage of their life, is bound in shadows and in miseries. On such a full sea are we now afloat, and we must take current when it serves, or lose our ventures." Thank you for your kind attention.